Welcome to our latest edition of CharitEpulse, our bi-weekly charity podcast. My name is Catherine Rastomji. I head the charities practice at Shakespeare Martineau, and I'm joined by my usual co-hosts, Charles Mosquita, Charity Director at Quilter Cheviot Investment Management, and James Saunders, Charity Audit Partner at leading accountancy and audit firm Moore Kingston Smith. Together we explore the latest pressing issues affecting the not-for-profit and voluntary sector. So the things that have caught my eye for this week relate to, and I'm convinced I have to get the name right, but it's the covenant, which some people may remember in a former guise, but we must all get used to the new terminology now, which is the covenant. Depending on the analysis that you read, it is either a new era in the relationship between government and the voluntary sector, or it is the formerly known as compact, but in a slightly new wrapper, perhaps. James, am I being unfair? Did you think there was more to it?
I definitely think there's more to it than the previous incarnation of this sort of effort that we might have seen in the past. There is, the document itself or the report itself, the guidance is, to me, a lot more extensive. There's a lot more to it. There is, as we've pointed out, reporting responsibilities as well. They're going to look at it, report on it annually. So I think there's got a good lot of effort gone into this. It clearly is across the sector from the number of people who have participated in the steering group that put this together. So I'm quite positive about it.
It's good. Charles, are you also feeling positive?
I think it's good there's been a reset. And I don't think there's no doubt that Sir Keir Starmer is very much so behind this. And he has, if you remember, they had a gathering with the sector, didn't they, pre the election? And they're certainly fulfilling through their commitment at that particular time. I mean, the issues that I sort of pick up, and like all of these things, it's can they then filter that down into the rest of government and get them to buy into it? I've said it before on this podcast. I think this should have been cross-party, because I don't think this should just be for this government. I think that it was, what was it, after Nick Hurd stepped down as the charity minister under the Conservative government, that the relationship appeared to have changed between government and the charity sector. And there is no doubt about it that how integrated the sector is into the welfare state, it needs to have that relationship. The one bit that always sort of brings a bit of a smile to my face is when they seem to be encouraging the charities to speak truth to power. But of course, they're the ones with the purse strings. And I think that's going to be quite a difficult thing to navigate. So, name may have changed. But I think fundamentally it's a good thing. I would just like to see it on a much more cross-party basis.
It to me, it smacks a little bit of the relationship with the EU, in that there's a long decline from over several years, and almost a spiral to the bottom in that relationship. And this is, as Charles says, it's a good reset. It shows a good commitment, I think, by the government to get back on track with charities, and let's move away from the rather more toxic approach that has been seen in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly from ministers who seem to delight in attacking the charity of their choice from week to week.
I have to say, I was always a big fan of the concept about big society. I thought actually David Cameron absolutely got the vision right. I was just really sad, for whatever reason, that they were not able to then fulfill that and move it through. Because I do think that we are very fortunate to have the depth and breadth of charitable organisations in the UK and the amazing work they do, and we really should celebrate that.
Yeah, and I think it will be interesting. One of the articles I read was talking about there will be a report annually by the government and the voluntary sector on the work carried out under the covenant and the difference it's making for charities. So, wait and see, I suppose, for that first year's report in particular, but good that there will be some information coming out of it. I think when we do talk about annual reports, I can't help this latest one always makes me think of you, Charles, but the research into public trust in charities for 2025 has been issued. And if you're thinking, gosh, have we not just recently had this report? I think we probably have recently had this report. But Charles, I always think you're quite up to date with the latest stats on where charities stand in our kind of global or nationwide consensus.
Well, I mean, the good news is that charities are sitting just below doctors and above the police and above the press and ministers and the man in the street, as it's referred to. So the fact that trust and confidence is back on the way up. I've had a fundamental problem with doing this on an annual basis. I just don't think they need to publish it. And of course, it's the Charity Commission doing it, which to my mind can raise concerns about, well, why are they doing it every year? And do they need to publish it? Because it doesn't really come out with anything particularly earth-shattering or different. So they could do it every 3 years or every 5 years, or publish it possibly every 3 or 5 years if they feel they need to do it every year. But the fact that charities are still, have high trust in the public doesn't surprise me. I'm not sure what more you can add.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated how many people they speak to and, who are these people that are asked each time. But yeah, James, did you see this one?
I think that probably the only thing to add really is there's some useful insights into how the public react to problems in charities. I'm not going to say the skip word, but if there are charities that have done daft things or hit the headlines for the wrong reasons, the gist seems to be that other charities don't, in the same sector, for example, don't suffer because of those. If anything, in fact, it helps, not helps, that's not quite right, but it means that the public support other charities as much or if not more as they would have done anyway. So there doesn't seem to be much guilt by association, which is good. They're not all, I think as you described earlier, Catherine, tarred by the same brush, if you like.
I do wonder how much the Charity Commission uses this to demonstrate their effectiveness as a regulator, both for their paymaster, the Treasury, to justify, because it wasn't that long ago when there was a fairly damning report, was it, into the Charity Commission's effectiveness? Was that 2011?
Yeah.
Around about then, where they...
And particularly because one of the questions is awareness and knowledge of the Charity Commission. Have you heard of the Charity Commission? You can't,
and also what their role is. So I think, from that part of it, I think that's useful to them. But do they need to publish it every year? Possibly not.
Yeah. I think it's harder to see trends, isn't
it? Catherine, one of the points they make is that in terms of how people have heard of the Charity Commission, the way that most people most recently have heard about the Charity Commission is through the Captain Tom Foundation inquiry, not through any other reasons. It seems to be the number one reason that people have heard about the Charity Commission. So that's never a great sign. I don't think that it's only the bad news that really catches the imagination.
I think, and they used to be, because if you remember, Oscar, the regulator in Scotland, does a similar thing for trust and confidence in charities north of the border. And it wasn't that long ago where we had a stark contrast between the way that Oscar would present the findings and the way the Charity Commission under Baroness Stowell would present them, which were, quite negative on that basis, and sort of things could get better. Where I think my sense with this is actually the sector's in a good place. Yes, there are always areas that could be improved. But fundamentally, trust and confidence is good in England and Wales.
Yeah, and I think interesting on that point, James, about Charity Commission inquiry reports, I think getting quite high profile coverage as well. So the latest one I was reading related to a statutory inquiry into Island Health Trust, a charity with objects to promote the provision of primary health care. But the issue here was that the former chair and two of the trustees were in breach of the charity's governing document and had been paid just under £350,000. Emphasis added by me there, but I do still think that is a lot of money to have been taken out of a charity. And just, some interesting commentary, I think, from the tribunal findings in relation to this case and wider lessons. James, I'll come to you first. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, they were quite harsh, weren't they, the Charity Commission? And in terms of punishment for this lady who was the former head, former chair who took the money, and the other trustees that were in place. I mean, I think we've covered this briefly before, but it really isn't a particularly nice case at all. There is some confusion as well. I think we've had a look at this between us, and we're struggling to work out how any money has been repaid here. There are reports that insurers have paid some back. There was another report that said the former chair had paid some back, but it's not absolutely clear exactly how much has been repaid. The Charity Commission report itself says, I think the quote from the Charity Commission representative was, we're glad that funds have been recouped. Not all the funds, but just generally funds, which suggests to me that not all the funds were recouped. So perhaps it is only the 160,000 that the insurers have coughed up that has been received back into the charity.
Yeah, and I was interested to read, I think it was in the instructions to the interim manager, that the Charity Commission had specifically asked them, the interim manager, to consider whether there were potential claims against the former trustees for breach of their duties in allowing this payment to be paid. So those kind of wider lessons, that is a huge wider lesson there, Charles. And I think we looked at it and thought, is there something missing there, I suppose, in how we're educating the rest of the sector? If there are these lessons, could they be explained more clearly in the Charity Commission's communications?
Yeah, because for starters, in their report, the Charity Commission described as significant misuse of funds. And yes, the fact that they put an interim manager in, which is relatively serious. Just for those people who've forgotten what the case was about, there was this charity owned a property that I think was let to a local GP, and there was a potential of development that was going on around them, and I think they wanted to bring in the building. And I don't know whether the consultancy of the chair, that whatever business is specializes in this particular area. Again, that's not clear about what it is that, because it talks about project management, but that covers a multitude of sins. But the other thing which should have sent alarm bells is that the amount of money that was paid to her consultancy company was 60% of the charity's income over 2 financial years, which is, so this is not small beer by any stretch of the imagination. But I do agree with you 100%, Catherine, that I think that if the Commission wants us to learn lessons and to use this, then they need to be clearer about exactly what has happened. Because as James says, we've looked at the various articles that have been in the press. We've tried to do a little bit of investigation from their report, and it is not clear about how much money has been recouped or from where that money came from. I think there have to be consequences, and the fact that there's been a significant misuse of funds, I don't see there's any reason why that information should be kept confidential.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a time lag with this case as well, in that the interim manager was appointed, I think, in 2019, reported in 2020. I think there was the agreement was reached in 2021. Then there was an appeal in 2022. So it drags on, doesn't it? In that here we are in 2025, and we're only just learning about these sorts of lessons now, which is, it makes it quite historic already, which I always find quite interesting how long that actually takes.
Captain, am I right that only the chair has been disqualified from trusteeship? Yes. So the other trustees who were in place at the time, who it's suspected are negligent in allowing this all to happen, haven't also been punished for it.
But also they've reduced. So she'd been, I think, disqualified for 12 years, and then having taken it to the tribunal's reduced that from 12 to 7. Now, let's not get it. Let's not put this out of perspective. 7 years is a significant time period to be excluded, but they don't really explain why they've reduced it from 12 to 7.
Yeah, it just says considered more proportionate. I think this is when it's a scale of naughtiness, isn't it? Because we do see other disqualification orders, and I think we could almost start laying bets on, oh, I think they'll get 12 or they'll get 10, or, so I suppose it's comparative to what others have done and how they've behaved. But again, we don't know that, do we? Because we're only seeing a tiny fraction of what's gone on behind it.
But I'm sorry, I just don't get how you can be chair of trustees and take quite such a significant sum over a relatively short time period where the conflicts are just so significant that you really can't manage that on a proportionate basis.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not clear about her consultancy, but I think a consultancy, she's a sole trader, isn't she?
Yes.
So this money is going directly, whether it's going to a consultancy or her, it's still exactly the same thing as far as I can gather.
I mean, for the lessons learned point, it's also not clear how this has come about. Has this come about because the chair was a very dominating personality who managed to push this through? And the other trustees were being weak. Was it actually that they were all in collusion? Because as we know, some of the other trustees were also paid, nowhere near as much, but were also paid. Was it a bit of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch you? We just don't know from the reporting and from the Charity Commission report the nuts and bolts of this, how it came about, and what people should be looking for as either warning signs or recognition that this sort of thing might happen.
But the difference
and actually, this did amuse me because the initial compliance case by the Commission had been opened and closed in 2017.
It had,
and
yes.
A local councillor highlighted concerns to the Charity Commission, and then a second inquiry was reported. And often we do talk about others getting involved in the Charity Commission's role, and it shouldn't be reactive depending on what's on the front pages. But here I thought, well, if that councillor hadn't done that, it's not clear whether this would ever have come to light, or how soon, if at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I think because they don't, and again, about transparency, they don't explain in the report why they closed the case, and then well, we know why it's reopened because there was another. But looking back in hindsight, were there things that they should have uncovered that they didn't? I mean, the thing is that they're all human, and I'm not expecting every time to get it right, but it'd just be useful to know just what has actually happened in reality. And yeah, okay, it's in hindsight, but at least they can be honest about their ability to investigate and what they uncovered or what they didn't.
Definitely. And I'm going to end on a high for this session, chaps, which is we're facing another crisis. I know it's a perma crisis. We like a crisis. We're good in a crisis. This latest crisis is a lack of succession planning, could leave smaller charities facing a crisis as senior leaders step down. And this survey, if you like, had been asked of 600 charity partners, and there was a question about succession planning. My issue would be that if you asked many of my clients about succession planning, they would talk about the board, because that's where you need to think of succession planning. They wouldn't think of it, I would say, for the chief executive and senior management, but that did seem to be more of this sort of message. Charles, did you despair of this crisis, or did you hold it together?
Well, so I suppose the two things. I mean, for starters, the organisations they seemed to be talking about or representing were ones had had turnovers of less than 500,000, which is, I mean, not inconsequential, but still relatively small. And one assumes that on that basis, they've got relatively small staff. And I know with the various charities I'm involved with, where we've got relatively small, and in many cases quite young staff, where you've got a reasonable amount of high turnover, there is only a certain amount of succession planning you can do. But things like, we had a situation where we had a finance manager who left, and actually what we've ended up doing is outsourcing. So we've removed the succession planning, and I think possibly charities possibly need to think about that. But if your chief executive goes, there are plenty of interim chief executives that can be put in. place. So I think you can go so far around succession planning, but actually I think there are more options than people think there are available. But a lot of cases where you've got a small amount of staff, I don't think there's much you can actually do on that basis.
James, would you see this being client-based?
I'm coming at it from a different angle, I have to say. I think that the most successful organisations, and this is just charities, it's anything, most successful organisations that you look at any one time have probably had really good succession planning over the previous few years. It's not to say that everyone gets it right all the time. It's not to say that every board, every charity will get it right every single time over the course of its lifetime. But it's a real strength if you can get it right. And I think really clever boards who are probably in a strong position anyway, trustee boards who are in a good position anyway, who don't have particularly worries over funding or massive tribunals going with that. If you're in a good position, it's obviously always a lot easier to plan for succession. And I suppose then you could argue success breeds success in a way because you're bringing in the right people. So I think if you're, I think it's definitely a positive if you can get it there. But I do appreciate it's not always easy to find the time and or get it right.
Sorry, James, I'm going to push back on that, because if you've got a chief executive, you don't know when they're going to step down, retire, or move on to another position.
No,
so
but you can plan for that.
Planning for that.
I'm going to turn to football now, and Brighton and Hove Albion have been brilliant over several years of having a plan B in place. And I remember them being interviewed about that. We were quite open with our manager, if in effect that's because that's the role they were talking about. We're quite happy with it, quite open with our manager. We know that people move on, and we've asked them what they think. Is good planning to me.
Again, I'll push back because football managers' life expectancy is about probably 3.5 months. In the turnover, I'm being unfair, but the turnover of those is particularly high. So actually having succession planning is much easier. Where, if you've got somebody who could be in post for 4 years or 10 years, how do you succession plan around that?
I don't think, when you say easy, I don't think it's easy. I think it's more difficult if you're going such short term. I honestly just think if you've got an established CEO who is interested and invested in the charity, I don't see why it's not a problem to say, right, well, we know we don't want you to leave, but we know you're not going to be around forever. In the interest of the charity and beneficiaries and all that, it's an easier argument to make for charities. In the interest of continuity for beneficiaries, for stakeholders, for everyone, let's just talk about what might happen if you move on. What sort of things are important? What do you find in your day-to-day life? And what sort of person or people do you think might be interested? It's always going to be from a position of strength. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Boards that are struggling are never going to be able to have this time and this, be able to invest in this way. But I think as an ambition, it's a really good thing to do.
I mean, we have it on our risk registers, definitely, about the consequences and how you deal with it. But a lot of those conversations are quite difficult to have under employment law, as I understand it. So you can go so far, but if the other party is not willing to share, and they may, and of course they do things that you're not necessarily expecting. So maybe a job offer that the dream job comes by, and off they are to do off. So I just think when you've got a small amount of staff, and I'm talking about organisations with anything between a couple of people up to 10 people, or one person up to 10 people, or maybe even 15 or 20, I think it becomes quite difficult to do succession planning effectively. And the other thing I think the sector does have an awful lot of young staff, particularly around the fundraising, and they have a propensity of moving for whatever reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would still say the bigger challenge around succession is trustees rather than employees, frankly, because when all said and done, you pay employees, and there's always an easier way of getting people in if you pay them than if you don't on the voluntary side. But that's probably an argument or discussion for a different time.
No, but I think trustees is much easier because they're voluntary, not paid, and they're much more willing to talk about how long that they're prepared to spend and sit on a board.
Oh, I'm not. I always bluff it. So people think I'm going to be there for longer than I actually am. They'll realise I have a shorter shelf life than they first thought.
Oh, now the secret's out,
that bit out,
Catherine.
maybe.
Yeah, there's a warning. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Charles and James, as ever. Thank you for listening. Don't forget you can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, on our own website, on LinkedIn. There is no excuse not to find us. Please give us some feedback. It'd be great to hear what you think, and also share with others if you found this of interest. And we look forward to having you join us on a future session. Thank you.